Egregores, let's talk about them. We're going to be talking about eggs. I'm just joking. Egregores, very important, not grimoires, not books of laws. Egregores is what we're going to be talking about. And I think the reason why this is important and why I came back with force, with a ferocity, is because I'm concerned that there are certain people, even within the community, the magical community, whether in the mundane community or in the religious aspects, I think you guys might be under the guise of an egregore. And I think this is something we need to talk about, something deeply, because I've been thinking about this very clearly. You know, I've noticed that there are certain people that sort of attribute aspects and characteristics of certain deities or beings that they revere or worship as being one way versus another one being in a different light. And I thought as though, well, it's not abnormal, for example, for someone to have different sort of aspects of personalities. Someone can be like that, so why can't a god be like that? That's a very true notion. However, in certain belief systems and customs, you notice that their gods, I believe, what they revere as gods, has certain characteristics, certain properties, and certain aspects of their being that I believe are inscribed in order for you to know, in fact, who you are talking to, who you are revering or venerating, who you are worshiping, and who you identify with. These are things that are very important. And there are many people that don't understand that aspect and that are sort of unknowingly, to my understanding, to be conversing with, praying to, or offering up to something that isn't what it says it is. Or is it? This is the issue I find here. As I was diving through the collective, which is essentially my name for all the knowledge of mages, witches, wizards, whatever you want to call yourself, on these certain aspects and certain matters, I came across the subject of egregores. It falls in line with things like guardians, spirits, even things like deities. Not so much the deity aspect. Egregores, they label them as sort of spirits. An egregore, for example, it can be something like the spirit of a nation, like America, for example. The sort of pride you feel for America, the ideals that America stands for, the principles on which the country is founded, how everyone feels about it, the sort of emotion you get, the motivation you get, what you give for America, your service for America, your life for America. You are essentially sort of devoting these certain aspects of yourself, even yourself entirely, to an idea. Okay, or I believe to a vision. That idea is interpreted as an egregore of a specific type. Now, do egregores have inherent power? They might, or they can, depending on how it is fueled and how it sort of identifies itself. Now, here is the interesting thing about egregores, however, because egregores are being labeled as, I believe, thought spirits, or beliefs, ideas or beliefs that sort of manifest into something a bit more. From where I come from, it is essentially the birthing of a god, or I believe a liaison that is comparative to a god in some standards. Now, I use these words carefully only because I know that some of you might find offense or might treat my words with, incredulity. But I'm simply asking you to keep an open mind about these certain subjects because I noticed something very importantly. And you sort of get to know these things. Now, for those of us who are aware of how spirits operate, there are tricks to spirits, and not all spirits are benign and benevolent creatures. There are some spirits out there that simply want to dick around, fuck with you. There are other ones that want to do you harm just because they want to. There are other ones that aren't too sure about what to do or what they are doing, and they require a little bit of guidance in what they're doing. And there are other ones that are, in fact, like it's a bit too much. So there's a lot of things that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about these things. So without derailing too much from the main point, the reason why I brought this sort of thing up is because it's something that I have noticed within the community. People that claim to pledge allegiance to a specific deity or a god of some kind will act and function a certain way in accordance with I believe, the what's the proper word or the terminology? They sort of act or embody certain aspects of the deity or the creature that they are working with. The issue that I have with people that, go with deities or anything else is because I feel as though those of us who go into the practice are trying to manifest power. We believe in sovereignty of spirit, sovereignty of mind, sovereignty of soul. When you sort of devote yourself, this is, again, my opinions and my ideas on it based on what I've seen, is that you are inherently surrendering your sovereignty to something else that may not have your ideas or perhaps your best interest in mind, or perhaps wouldn't do things a certain way you would. However, you dare not question because you believe as though it will go against the powers that give you benefit or that believe elevate your life. And as a practitioner, I believe as a person that studies these sort of occult things, it's important for those of us to understand that whenever something is inherently changing your being, and this is sometimes something that goes unnoticed to the person. There are certain things you have to keep in mind. When you have manifested behaviors that you normally wouldn't have, but since you started following a certain aspect of a deity, when you idolize someone, when you believe in a person, in their ideals, you start to embody those beliefs. And over time, those beliefs become manifest through your actions and through your being. The issue with beliefs is that they can essentially change a person's core, a person's mind, and a person's spirit inherently. This is where you have to be extra careful. Okay, there are certain deities that mean to do harm, that are fine with certain things, and I understand that the whole aspect of morality means nothing within the magical community. It is simply perspectives of points of view. I say that only because if you're essentially given freedom and sovereignty, that incorporates any and every aspect of whatever you want to believe in. There are some people, even practitioners, that say you shouldn't use dark or black magic. This is simply a form of magic. What you do with it sort of aligns you to a type of moral level, I believe a moral standing within the society, I guess within the community. However, because we study things like magic and because we have sovereignty, we can essentially engage or do certain acts or behaviors that aren't inherently wrong within the aspect of belief that we have, but it sort of it goes into our lifestyle. Things like people, for example, I recently came upon someone that practices, I think, West African witchcraft, things of that nature. To a certain extent, these are certain types of people, and well, let me rephrase that. He's racist! No, that's not what I mean. I'm talking about practitioners, mostly. At least from my understanding. What they do is that they sort of, they have a certain type of magic that involves, I guess, like special components, things like blood or things that are sort of rare, things that have a certain type of meaning. And so, they would have things like, they would slaughter animals, sacrifice things, which other religions have done in the past, and we sort of moved away from that. But in their craft and in what they do, it is considered something positive because it is bringing something positive in working. You are essentially sacrificing, I guess, the life of an animal, spilling its blood, which has some value, believe it or not. And it is sort of an offering, or believe a type of way to sort of garner the attention or the favor, whatever you're working with. However, when you go across the ocean to a place like here, it is something that is not respected, or at least not something that is entirely supported. And so it is, I don't want to say demonized, but it is something that is, told you shouldn't do here. The issue is when it comes to things like magic, or believe how we sort of function within these sort of types of communities, honestly, we don't really have a say in the matter, in the matter itself. It's simply a practice that we don't do for different ideological reasons. That's all it is to it. So when you have that sort of moral ambiguity, this is sort of where you sort of, start to see these strange things, these sort of things that people don't like. That sort of, pushes them away. But all of these things tend to happen. So back to egregores, when you have certain people that are under a certain belief system or believe a functionality within a faith that commit themselves to a deity most of the time, they start to do things for this deity. They start to, give offerings of a certain type. They start to, speak certain words that the deity identifies with. they sort of start to embody the values. The reason why I'm going at this is because I'm trying to give you guys a comparison. Okay? For example, I use this one out, but it's one that I have very good commonality with. When we're talking about the religion here, primarily in America, which is, the Christian faith, I believe the Judeo-Christian values, there is something that I believe I brought up during a conversation I believe was quite interesting. This is why I bring Egregores to a certain, aspect here we have to think about. And it doesn't just concern this God, it concerns the other ones, okay? The reason why I'm a bit concerned is because I've noticed that there are different types of branches within Christianity that all inherently follow, I believe, worship a particular deity, or, I believe what the deity stands for, according to their faith or their belief system. However, they follow, certain doctrines or even things like dogmas, let's be honest, to the letter. Then you start to notice, if you're looking at them, if you observe them, they start to embody aspects of these other types of scriptures, of their understandings of the deity itself, and perhaps even of this egregore. The issue why I bring up egregore again is because you can't all worship a single deity and all have completely different aspects or walks of life to a certain extent if you're trying to embody the aspects of this deity. If you are serving a god that acts, says, and demands certain things in a certain way, and then you have another group that does something completely different or opposite, you can't both say you're serving the same thing, because that's not how that works. That's like someone saying, well, Leonok is a very kind-hearted person. He gives charity, and he's a very people person. Another side says, well, no, Leonok, he is all about the light, and so nothing like what you believe in is something that is allowed. You shouldn't engage in these sort of carnal or dark natures and what they interpret as dark. Because I'm a servant of, I guess, the light, but not what they're thinking about. Each side has a certain aspect or belief in my being and my quality, and they interpret it in different ways. But the problem is that when a large amount of each side believe within an aspect or the idea of an aspect, that aspect starts to manifest into something else. And the energy starts to gather and form into something more palpable, something more powerful in that aspect. And this being that is then created is an egregore. And the issue is that egregores through time, again, this is according to where I come from, our theories on egregores, is that over time, an egregore can adopt or take the place of a god or a deity. Does that mean that the God itself is real or not? This is where we sort of get into the whole, I don't want to step on any eggshells. I don't mean to offend anyone, but it is entirely possible that perhaps half the pantheons or perhaps the types of gods that I believe you believe in aren't really what they say they are. And you can sort of see this from the aspects and the lifestyles that these sort of people go through. There is something to be taken in as to, well, we are human, and so we make mistakes. We do things that others don't agree with, or everything else. We are imperfect creatures, But then it's like, well, if you're imperfect, your imperfect thoughts, your imperfect, belief systems and aspects around those thoughts can in turn create an imperfect and flawed egregore or deity. And the issue is that if you have one area, for example, that says, well, God loves everyone, God forgives everyone else, God is like this, God likes this, God doesn't like this. And then you have another area that says, well, God is the type of God that loves everyone, but God actually allows this and he prefers this and everything else. And so you have two different sides that essentially believe in the same thing, but they sort of create different aspects. So instead of it probably even being the true deity that they believe in, they create, unbeknownst to them, their own separate type of deity. And you can notice this if you observe correctly, how it's like, well, if you were really talking to the deity, for example, if it was really who it says it was, it would tell you what is, what is not. And everyone that is underneath that would follow those things to the letter. If they have certain shortcomings, it is known, it is brought up, and it is corrected, preferably by the deity itself. But because we do not see that within organized religions or even belief systems, even within the pagan or even witchcraft communities or the witch communities, this is something that I think, I don't want to say I'm concerned about, but it is something that we need to think about entirely. If you're really speaking to Hecate, if you're really speaking to, Kyrinos or Cyranos, if you're really talking to any other of the gods, Greek god, the green man, if you were talking to anybody else, I do not believe that, the way one person acts that is under the deities or, the spirit's actual, fold versus another one that says the same thing would be completely different. I don't see how that works. It's like, if everyone is under a certain company, for example, the CEO of a company, the founder of the company, he has certain rules, bylaws, things you're supposed to follow. These are certain things that, help people identify with who these people work with, who they fall under. So the people that are with the company, this is why companies make a big deal about it. That's why they have certain things like, code of conducts, things like ethics within the workplace, There's a strict code here that everyone who identifies and follows the group or the leader is supposed to follow. If you violate these things, they can terminate you and essentially kick you out of the fold. You are no longer part of them because they're trying to set themselves apart. They're trying to identify as something else. It is how everything functions here. That is essentially how I believe or how I see deities work, for example, Now, this is not to say that perhaps there are some deities that can respect the way you are, your being. However, if you're going to dedicate yourself to following a deity of a specific type that gives you rules you're supposed to follow and lifestyles you're supposed to adhere to, you can't have another group of people that claim to serve the same type of being and do something completely different. There's sort of a dichotomy there that doesn't inherently make sense. Unless if you serve a deity that is essentially dual in its nature, how it does everything one way but everything the opposite, all within one deity, then we can talk about those sort of things. But seeing how there are certain groups of people, or perhaps whole swaths of nations, and nations themselves, that claim one thing, do those things, but then other people who do the opposite claim to serve the same sort of thing or the same cause. Some people could say, as an opposition choice. Well, for example, let's think about it as America. America itself is an egregore. I think Jason Miller also sort of spoke about this or confirmed this, unless it was Taylor Elwood when it came to things like spiritual egregores. It was one of them. But he essentially said that the spirit of a nation can also be a type of egregore. It is essentially an idea or belief that everyone has towards one thing. That one thing, when it gains enough power, ability, or whatever it is sort of an egregore. But does that make it a real thing? This is what's sort of debated. But these certain egregores can take the place of a god, That's just how I sort of see these certain things. It's something that I was thinking very highly about. Because it's something you do see, for example. You have people within the community that serve people like Persephone. Or, you have people that serve, Diana. Or you have people that, and they try to embody other sort of types of deities or gods. Or, people that dedicate themselves to Thor or Zeus, as an example, Each of them have their own sort of caveats or certain things that may or may not be true depending on the deity itself. But these sort of things have to be made clear. If you are serving what you claim to be a real thing, a deity or a spirit of a certain, altruistic type of power, if you are going to associate with that sort of person, they have to make it very clear what they like, what they don't like, because they don't want to be confused with anyone else. Anyone with sense, a person would do that. I wouldn't want you to, sort of confuse yourself with someone else. I want to make sure that you know who I am and that you know who you are talking to. And you're going to talk to me a certain way. I don't want you to be fake. I want you to be vulgar with me. I want you to be vulnerable. There are some people that you can't speak that way with them. But those are their markers. That is essentially what they sort of encapsulate. So when you have egregores, or even things like deities, that sort of put rules in place, it is because they are identifying with an aspect, and they expect people that associate with them to also identify with the aspect, because things like oil and water, I guess, don't mix. Things of that nature. You have certain gods that don't like other ones. The same can be said for egregores. because egregores embody certain aspects of belief, and they sort of are those sort of things when they are created. But when you have something else, another egregore that perhaps is something different, it can create an opposition, or where, it can create, issues. And these sort of aspects, however, when they are put within a society, are things that people believe in. It can cause a sort of, type of friction to occur. The problems, around certain aspects within the country of America, what you find in South America right now, what you find in Asia and everything else. There are certain countries that say they stand for something. But then the people that are within those countries believe something else, but say they stand for those countries. There is essentially there's an impasse, I believe, a clash within the egregore of a nation that has inherent principles or beliefs or aspects in mind that clash with another person that claims to believe in that sort of thing, but is trying to, I believe, change the nature of the egregore. You can't do that once the egregore is already made, because you're essentially creating another egregore that claims to be the same type. There could be an issue perhaps later on that these egregores will try to merge, and then it creates a sort of chaotic deity, which some people don't want, and other people do welcome. But this is something that I think is very important for everyone to understand and for everyone to take into account. Whenever we are saying that we are serving a particular deity, make sure that you are receiving actual communications and proof of it. A deity or a being of a certain type, if they want to be made known, they will. And if they want to prove their existence, they will. And because they don't want to be compared to something fake, it is incredibly insulting. Some other ones, maybe they don't care, but when it concerns things like offerings, things that they can receive and stuff in nature, things like currency or whatever, worship, that sort of starts to affect them in a certain way. It's how certain stakeholders, or people that own businesses in the market, work. If there's another competitor that's essentially taking customers away from them, pulling their money away, they're going to have an issue with that. They want to claim a monopoly or belief. They want to have a standard. They want to have an identification. They want to have individuality within the market. Okay? That is why you have things like brands on clothes, You have things like Armani. You have things like Versace. You have things like Burberry. You have things like, things like Adidas. You have all these certain types of companies, aspects, or everywhere. They have a marker. They have a brand. They have a characteristic. So when you link that to egregores, to gods, to even things like business or practices, they all have to coincide. They all have to align within it. Otherwise, you could be doing something else and slapping a different name on it. This is something you have to be very careful. People that claim to believe in God, as the Judeo-Christian one as an example, you have to be sure, it is who it says it is. Because there's too many different branches. They all have to do something completely different. You have, for example, I'm sorry, but you have Mormons that believe in something. They claim they serve God, but their book that they say God gave is completely different from what another group was given. The Jews have their own different versions. The Christians have the Catholics, I guess like the Catholic watered down, whatever version, whatever it is. But they all claim to serve the same deity. But there's certain aspects of each type that accept things, don't accept things, that allow this, don't allow that, and that do this thing, but also do this. And it contradicts the aspects of the elements of the deity that they serve. But they claim that it is, it's human error. That's fine, okay? But you also have to account for, if human error can create an egregore, and an egregore is an embodiment of certain aspects or ideals, and the people that identify with the egregore and not the god also adapt those same ideals, that is where we have the issue. And that is something that we have to keep in mind when we are dealing with these sort of things. That is why people that are legitimate practitioners, people that converse with spirits, that meditate, they try to focus, they try to discern whether or not it is who they are talking to, will do tests, because you have to test the spirits because they can lie. You have to observe, you have to speak with, you have to look at the iconography, you have to look at identifiers. That is something that matters even to spirits, okay? This is something you have to keep in mind when speaking about egregores. Okay, I'm simply bringing to you a word of caution and knowledge here. You have to be very careful. These sort of things can and do happen. Okay, when you believe in a person that, stands for something, you're going to embody aspects of their belief. You're going to adopt it. You're going to absorb it, and it becomes you. you become it. And so you start to do things according to how a person did it. When little kids grow up and they watch their superheroes, every type of superhero sort of embodies a certain aspect. Villains do the same exact thing. Everyone wants to be like Spider-Man. Why? Everyone wants to be like Superman. Why? Some people want to be like Maleficent because she's fabulous. Some people want to be like Magneto because he's badass. There's a lot of things, but there are aspects and characteristics of things that we like, that we then identify with, and we sort of adopt those things and absorb them into our life, and it affects us and changes us if we allow them. But the issue is that when you are practicing submission over sovereignty of your own personal being, that is when you can come under the guise of an egregore. Okay? So I hope all of you learned that. Thank you so much for watching, by the way. I know some of these videos can perhaps be a bit long. I believe, they draw on, but this is something that I'm a bit passionate about. But like I said, there are a lot of things and subjects that I am going to talk about later on in the future. This one, for example, is a book that I am sort of writing things down, sort of steps and things that I'm doing. I am practicing a bit here, sort of getting my feet wet in it. I'm trying to find out the legit shit, because there's a lot of, fluff out there that's like, no, okay. And we're going to do the whole light worker thing. Everyone has their own practice. You have to test the spirits, is what I'm urging all of you to do. Test yourself, Sure, you can claim the whole, placebo effect. And sure, if it works for you, that's fine. If you believe other people are under the placebo effect, that's fine as well. But I think you have to keep an open mind, because I see all of these beings as forms of energy. Not all energy are spirits, but all spirits are energy. Okay? What we are, who we are, how I see you, how you see me, how you act. You yourself are a spirit. You exude things or show things of, identity, self-awareness, power, sovereignty, all of these aspects. The ability to learn and do all of these things. That's what I identify as a spirit, versus an energy can simply be just a form. It can be power incarnate or whatever it is. Not all energy even has the same sort of abilities or beliefs as self-identification as spirits do, but it's a whole thing. But I'm so happy for all of you to tune in. I hope all of you are having a marvelous day. I hope all of you are remembering to practice in safety, whether it is sex or magic, that you look after one another, look after yourself first, because you can't do it if you're dead. And that you remember that I care for you. I try to be as honest as I can with you, and that I am here for you. If you have questions, feel free to post in the comments. I will try to, come up with something a bit more solidified, perhaps a type of, email or something that I believe you can respond to or ask questions about. I'm not a savant in these sort of aspects. I have ideas and theories on these sort of things. If you perhaps see this video and you are someone who's a bit seasoned or whatever, you want to talk more about these sort of issues and the wise think about this, and perhaps if you want to contest these things with me, prove that I'm wrong and the reasons why, I'm more than willing to listen, because I am a seer. I am a seeker. I'm trying to find out things. Not see, I'm sorry. I'm trying to learn a bit more about the craft. I want to commune more. I want to learn more. I want to develop a relationship with spirits of all kinds. But I want to make sure I'm doing it the right way, as I encourage all of you to do. Okay? Even I could be at fault or could be wrong about something. Okay? But I encourage all of you to be better than me. Okay? So, without further more delay, thank you and goodbye. Okay? Oh, and don't eat any cold food they give you at a party, because it's probably filled with salmonella. I think I might have had some last night. I have not stopped shitting. Goodbye!